Coming up this time, more classic Cloughie stories.
So I went in to see the gaffer and I said, I'd like a pay rise. And he threw a copy of the Evening Post at me. He said, put that in your shoes, that'll rise you off the ground a bit. I can still remember Bob Wilson doing Football Focus or Football whatever it was at dinner time, saying, this is Forest Waterloo, this will be it. They won't beat Man United. And then when we beat them 4, I think everybody learnt to say, we better not say any more here.
When I was working for a living, Manchester United were the biggest club in Europe. They hated us. We had the audacity to beat them. Same with Liverpool. We knocked them out the European Cup. They couldn't believe it.
Clough used to say, get the ball and give it the little fat so-and-so on the line, and then we'll go from there. Robbo was one of these players who would always receive the ball no matter what. How tight he was being marked, he was always available. He would always make sure that if he couldn't get it, there was something else on. But he was a talented boy who basically didn't know his own ability.
I've got a picture here, if I just reach across, the 77-78 team, the team picture, and there you are, in between the great man and Peter Shilton. Yeah. When you see yourself there with all the other great names, what sort of comes to your mind?
Well, I was always said to stand in between people who are ugly. So I thought I'd stand next to the gaffer, and Shilts wasn't, and Burnsy was behind me, so I was better looking than Burnsy.
All that and the chance to win a book signed by one of Cloughie's European Cup legends.
Hello, I'm Colin Barrett. You're listening to the Green Jumper podcast with Marcus Alton. The one person you wanted to walk through that door at 2:45 was Brian Clough. Because when he walked through that door at 2:45, we were ready.
Welcome along to the Green Jumper podcast with myself, Marcus Alton from brianclough.com. My guest today is a man who scored a momentous goal during Cloughie's European glory years, and he has some fond memories of Brian, who once called him a model professional, I'm told. It's Colin Barrett. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Marcus.
Now, the goal I was referring to, of course, was the one against Liverpool, first round of the European Cup. All these years later, do people still like to talk about that particular goal with you?
I think it's the only question they remember to ask me, because there's one or two others that I keep telling them, well, I did score in the Anglo-Scottish Cup final. I scored one or two others, but they always remember that goal, and that goal is mainly... Well, basically, it's my living, really.
It was a tremendous goal, and I can still see it in my mind. And we'll come on to that a bit later. But looking back, can you remember what happened when you first heard that Cloughie was interested in signing you for Forest back in 1976, I think it was?
Well, yeah, I can remember it as if it was yesterday. I wanted a transfer from Manchester City, and Tony Buck was the manager then. And I asked for a transfer, and I went at home, and obviously no mobile phones, but he rang the house, the home number. He said, I've got Brian Clough on the phone from Forest, and he wants to take you on loan. And I said, I don't want to go on loan. I know what loan play is about. You go on loan for a month, and then you come back to Man City, and then you're no further forward. I want a permanent move. So he said, OK, I'll tell him that. So next phone call, within 20 minutes, is Brian Clough. And he says, hey, you don't want to sign for me? I said, it's not that. I said, you don't want to play for me? I said, it's not that. I said, it's the fact that you're only offering me a loan and I want a permanent move. And he said, I can understand that. And he said, but let's think about it the other way. He said, you don't know me and I don't know you. Why don't we meet and then we can talk about it and then you can decide then. So I said, OK, fair enough. He said, where do you know? I said, well, I'm in Stockport. And he said, well, he was in Derby, which I knew he would be. And he said, well, I said, Leek Town Football Ground. I'll meet you outside of there. He said, I'll meet you outside of there in an hour. So 1 hour later, I was outside Leek Town Football Cup, and he rolls down in his car. I get out of my car. He said, jump in. So I went in his car. We went 200 yards down the road and into a pub. And then we just started to talk to each other about the forthcoming event. And then eventually, after that meeting, he said, right, I'll see you at the City Ground, 12 o'clock, Saturday. you come in on loan, and I'll sort it out with Man City end. You make sure you're there for 12 o'clock, and I'll see you Saturday. And he didn't give me a lift back to my car. I had to walk back to my car.
And so he persuaded you to go on loan, even though you were a little bit apprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, it was a classic Clough. Well, you're playing in Man City's reserves at the minute, or in and out, and you'll be playing in my first team. So you're better off playing in my first team, and than you playing in the reserves at City. So I said, okay, I can see that. And then he said, then we'll get to know each other. You come for a month, and then I'll tell you then. So I went for the month. At the end of the month, he said, I've extended it to 3 months. So I thought, well, that's not fair. He said, it's the way it is, son. Like it, I lump it. And so I stayed to the end of the season. And then he said, yeah, I'll sign you. And at that point, I said to him, okay, what's the fee? And he said, they want 30,000, but I'm only paying 29 because I won't pay 30,000 for you. So I said, okay, fine. I said, but I've asked for a move. And I said, the only reason is that because you asked for a move, then you forego your 5% of the transfer fee. So he said, don't worry, come off the transfer list on Thursday. I'll sign you Friday, and then you'll get your 5%. So that's what happened.
It worked out in the end. Yeah. I read in Maurice Edwards' book, he was a scout for Cloughie, that he'd been to Man City to watch Tommy Booth, I think it was, and ended up recommending you instead. Yeah. Did you hear that?
I heard that many years later, and it was like, I think I've seen somebody. I said, I don't understand what's happened. But then Cloughie obviously got hold of me, and obviously from then everything changed.
Did you sense in those first few months with Clough, and this was before Peter Taylor joined, that something exciting, something big was about to happen?
Not really. I think from my own point of view, obviously I wanted to get a permanent move and start my career again. And then as things aspired, I don't think even they dreamt what would happen happened. So I just said, well, you're on you made the move, do the best you can. He signed you, and then you start your footballing career again. And then after that, it was just a case of, you've signed, you've made the decision, you've moved, then you're in the team 1 week, and if you're doing all right, you stay in the team the next week, and as the football story goes, the rest is history.
Yeah. You began, I think, at right back for Forest, and obviously you're also well known for playing at left back, and you played in the centre as well, I think, in defence. Did Cloughie give you any specific instructions when you went out, or was it just fairly basic stuff?
Bottom line, he didn't necessarily have to teach you how to kick a football. He expected you to know that. So that's the rock bottom basics. And then after that, it was basics. He said, basically, get hold of the ball and pass it to somebody who's a better player than you. So that was it. And it didn't change from that. He said, if the ball comes in my penalty box, centre half, if you head it, or if you can't head it, then you fullbacks, you head it. So it was very, very basic. His principles of football.
Did you prefer right back or left back, or as long as you were in the side, you didn't mind?
I didn't mind. Exactly those, correct what you say there. As long as I was in the side, I didn't care where I played. And luckily for me, I was adaptable all along the back line. I even played in midfield for a time. I did a spell for about 10 minutes up front, which didn't last long. And then you just, the one thing about in those days, you had small squads than they are today. And if somebody was injured, somebody would have to fill in. And normally along the back line, it was me that moved and nobody else moved. So luckily for me, I could do that. And luckily for those other people who just, they just filled straight into the what they know.
So that versatility must have been really, really good for you. I understand, I think when you were a youngster, you did play up front quite a bit.
I did as an amateur. I played up front. And when I went to Man City, I went as a forward player. And then they converted me. It was Johnny Hart, Paul Hart's dad, that was one of the trainers at Man City.
Yeah.
And we were out this game, and we had a game against the first team. I was playing, and we had this man-to-man session, and I happened to be marking Mike Sowerby, and in a defensive mode. And then from that moment on, they decided that that's where I was going to play. I was going to play more defensively than I was attacking. Even though I thought I was half decent, going forward. They felt differently.
Yeah.
But it was, it's a case of, needs must. If that's what we wanted to do, I could do it.
Yeah. And of course, at Forest, on the left-hand side, you were playing alongside John Robertson, who is obviously another Forest legend in the European Cup victories. What was it like playing alongside him?
It's quite simple because Clough used to say, get the ball and give it the little fat so-and-so on the line and then we'll go from there. Robbo was one of these players who would always receive the ball no matter what was, how tight he was being marked. He was always available. He would always make sure that if he couldn't get it, there was something else on. But he was a talented boy who basically didn't know his own ability. But he was just sensational at the time. And from the club's point of view, at that moment in time, we had a lad called Terry Curran who played down the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And I think Clough and Taylor staked their thing down Terry Curran's side. And then Terry got injured in a serious injury, and I think he did his knee. And then we didn't have anybody. Martin was down that side anyway. So the roles were reversed. Everything used to go down the right-hand side with Terry Curran. Now the roles were switched and everything's going down the left-hand side with John Robertson. And then you saw the best of John Robertson. So luckily for them, it worked. And luckily for us, for everybody else concerned, it worked for the club as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when you made your debut for Forest, I think Cloughie invited you into his office.
Yeah, that was a classic. Going back to when I signed and I met him at the City Ground, the first game. I think the first game was Fulham. And I sat down, my wife Sue was with me, and first thing he asked as I walked through, I just said, hello, Mr. Clough. He said, hi, Col. He said, do you want a drink? I said, no, I'm playing this afternoon. He said, son, you're playing. He said, don't worry about that. He said, but if it makes you play better or it makes you play well, have a drink. So I don't know whether he was testing me out, but I said, no, I'm okay. And I obviously played that day and I thought everything was all right.
Yeah. As you've already said, that the rest is history. What was it like playing in that title-winning team, having won promotion and then absolutely storming the First Division? I mean, you even played in that fantastic 4-0 win over Manchester United at Old Trafford. Yeah. What was that like?
That first half of that season, I can honestly say it was the best football I, as an individual, have ever played. And after Christmas, it became a battle. And it was an intense battle. We seemed to gloss over the fact that sometimes we were battered by sides, but we came away with a 1-0 or a 0-0 or one each draw or whatever. We got a result from somewhere. And but we didn't play particularly well in terms of football-wise after Christmas, but we did battle well. We were a side that was equipped to do most things, and we could play if you wanted to play. We could kick if we wanted to kick, and no problem there. But it was just the big turning point, I think, for all of us at that moment in time was the Old Trafford 4-0. Because then I think we all realised, hold on, we've got something here. We really have got something. And because I can still remember Bob Wilson doing Football Focus or football, whatever it was at dinner time, saying, this is Forest Waterloo. This will be it. They won't beat Man United. And then when we beat them 4, I think everybody learnt to say, we better not say any more here. And then the rest, as I say, we went on. And virtually, we won the league with about 3 or 4 games to go. But I say first half was brilliant. First half of the season, it was free-flowing. Everything was hunky-dory. But the second half of the season was a battle.
And of course, you went on and helped Forest reach the League Cup final that season, but it was injury that struck and you weren't able to actually play in the final. Did Cloughie have any sympathy for you?
He doesn't like people being injured.
No.
I know that for a fact. And I think it was just basically a football. It's the way it is. It's just a work-related injury. You've got an injury. I had a stress fracture and I couldn't walk. And he said, well, you can't play. And so you deal with it after that. Yeah. Throughout my career, I think I've missed 5 finals, including 2 at Man City, for various reasons. And, I eventually played to Southampton, the next one. So that I was really lucky in that one.
Yeah, and the Charity Shield as well. I think you played in that one. So it must have been good to have come through those bad times and play at Wembley.
Well, it's every young boy's dream to do two things. One at that time was to play at Wembley, and two was to play for your country. I never managed to play for the country bit, but to play at Wembley and against Ipswich it was, I think, in the Charity Shield, I thought, well, I've made it now. Because the only chances you saw anybody play at Wembley in those days were either a cup final or an international. Now everybody can play at Wembley. Now you have playoffs, you have various other competitions. So there are more competitions for you to get a chance to play at Wembley. But in the old days, you were very rare unless you were in a final of some sort.
You also played in that crucial game at Coventry that won the title. It was a 0-0 in the end. Fantastic save from Peter Shilton that everyone remembers. What was the mood like after that? Because I've read and heard elsewhere that you'd won the league, but it was still quite subdued.
It was in a way, because I think it didn't really dawn on us what we'd done. I think at that particular moment in time, we come off the pitch and as a football match, it was 0-0 and we got a 0-0 battering. Goalkeeper had one of those days where you could have played till the cows come home and you wouldn't have beaten Peter Shilton that day. So we got the point, we got in the dressing room, and Cloughie says, right, on the bus, home. But we went out into Nottingham, don't get me wrong, when the penny really dropped, and we all said, right, let's go and have a beer, and we did it in Nottingham.
Yeah. I've got a picture here, if I just reach across, the 77-78 team, the team picture, and there you are, in between the great man and Peter Shilton, we've just been talking about. When you see yourself there with all the other great names, what sort of comes to your mind?
Well, I was always said to stand in between the people who are ugly. So I thought I'd stand next to the gaffer, and Schultz wasn't, and Burnsy was behind me, so I was better looking than Burnsy. Yeah. So I thought to myself, I'm in a good place here. But no, I think if you look at that team sheet, there are 13, 14 players on there. And that was it. That was our squad. 14 players, 15 players. You did go to 16 players when we went into Europe, but other than that, those were the bulk of the players that saw out. I think we played 60 or 70 games that season, and we played in all those games.
Well, we'll take a short break now for a competition to win a book signed by Colin, and then we'll be back to talk about memories of that goal against Liverpool and some more Cloughie stories.
If you don't see me after half-time, it means you've been bloody rubbish. And if you're not rubbish today, that'll be a change.
And now here's the chance for you to win a book signed by Colin Barrett. It's a copy of one of my books. It's Brian Clough, 50 Defining Fixtures. And the question is, from which club did Cloughie sign Colin Barrett? All you have to do is put the answer and your details in the entry form, and that's on the podcast page of the tribute website, brianclough.com. So to win that book signed by Colin Barrett, just let us know from which club did Cloughie sign Colin. And all the terms and conditions are on the podcast page of brianclough.com. Good luck. It's the Green Jumper podcast with myself, Marcus Alton, and I'm with Colin Barrett. And I think, Colin, you had quite an unusual response from Cloughie when you went to see him about a pay rise once.
They offered me a new contract. In those days, they had to offer you a contract before your contract had finished, and maybe a week before the last game of the season, you on a retain list, and they had to put that retain list out before the last game of the season. But they had to offer you a contract, and all they do is offer you the same money that you've been on for 2 years, and they've offered you a contract. Yeah. So I went in to see the gaffer and I said, I'd like a pay rise. And he threw a copy of the Evening Post at me. He said, put that in your shoes, that'll rise you off the ground a bit. And that was it. Walked out of the office, didn't get a pay rise until about a month later, when actually my contract was up, and then we renegotiated my contract for the next couple of years.
I think, generally speaking, you got on quite well with Cloughie, didn't you? What was he like to work for on a day-to-day basis?
It was, again, I say very, very, very basic. He was my boss. really. So the boss-player relationship, he was a little bit more distant than they probably are today. But the way I describe Brian Clough is that I would run through a brick wall for him, and I mean that sincerely, but I wouldn't cross the road to have a drink with him. Now, that sounds a bit strange, I mean, you know, even though I probably would cross the road to have a drink with him, but I certainly wouldn't have gone out of my way to initiate that drink. Whereas if he said, Cole, you see that wall there? I want you to run through it. I would have done.
And that was the inspiring man management, I guess, of him.
As I say, it's a very basic talking. He expected you to know your job. He expected you to go across that white line and you make your own decisions. He said he could give you the broad outline of how to perform or what he expected of you. But it was down to you when you crossed that white line. And I think footballers, I might be wrong, but footballers today, they believe that they have to be told every single thing that happens. Whereas I believe you make your own decisions when you cross that white line. You make your own decisions whether you pass the ball. You make your own decisions whether you get up and head the ball. All those things, you make your own decisions. Whereas they think it's somebody else's fault. And I believe that a footballer, when he crosses that white line, you've had all the information you need, but you have to make decisions yourself when you cross that white line.
And on that note, you made the decision that night against Liverpool to take the ball forward. And it was that fantastic goal, first round of the European Cup. It made it 2-0 on the night, which made it extra special. What can you remember of that particular moment and the build-up to it?
Well, obviously, we got the first goal with Gary Birtles, and we 1-0 up with 10 minutes to go. It went to 5 minutes, I think it was. And then, from my point of view, I was just blocking them going forward. And I blocked it once, and then I blocked it twice, and then it fell to Gary Birtles on the left-hand side. And I just went. And, you know, he crossed the ball, Woodcock, and then I scored a goal. But the interesting thing afterwards, in the dressing room, Martin O'Neill, who was sub that night, tells the story of Clough and Taylor in the dugout. And Clough and Taylor in the dugout are going, what's he doing? Where's he going? Get back, get back, get back. Oh, brilliant goal, well done. And then, apparently in an interview after with the press, I think one of them said, we always encourage our fullbacks to go forward. And I just thought, that's hilarious, that. Because if I hadn't scored, I know there was going to be a fine coming. I know all that sort of thing. But from my point of view, I was always taught, you know, when you're going forward and when you're trying to engage, if you're in a positive mood, you make sure you're available for somebody else going forward. And that's what we did.
As I say, it was 2-0 on the night. That goal is seen as so important because psychologically it really more or less finished Liverpool off, didn't it, in that tie? I know there was still more work to do, but 2-0 was much better than 1-0.
That's what Birtles said to Emily News, I think. To Phil Thompson wants it.
Yes.
Because Phil Thompson said to him halfway through the game, 1-0's not enough. And then when we got the second goal, Birtles said to Thompson, well, is 2 goals enough? We thought we could defend because that was our talent. You know, we were a good attacking side as well, but we could defend very, very well. Because when we won the league, I think we only conceded something like 21 goals in 40-odd games, and Schultz only conceded 15 of those in 38 or 40 games that he played. So we were defensively pretty sound, and we felt we could defend a 2-0. Having said that, it did help the fact that they didn't score. So you couldn't count on me for getting them through because they won 2-0 at home, 0-0 away. Can
you remember how you felt that moment? Because I can still see you with one of your arms in the air, just running away. It was such a brilliant volley.
I thought it was a classic, but it's the older I get, I tell them the farther out I am. So I know it was only about 5 or 6 yards out when I volleyed it, but I've told everybody I was 25 yards out and I volleyed it in the top corner, and nobody ever sees the goal nowadays. So I've got away with that.
Yeah. But it was still took a lot of guts to do. I mean, for Woodcock to head it delicately to you, and you're right in front of the goal, but it must have been very easy to have just flung it over the bar.
you just hope to connect, and which I did, and I just felt that it's everything you've been taught, really.
Yeah.
You know, the ball's there, don't snatch at it, just swing through the ball, and that's exactly what I did. And you know, luckily for me, nobody got hold of it. They went straight in the back of the net, and I say we're now talking about it, and if I'd have had £1 for everybody that's asked me the question, I'd be a multi-millionaire now.
I bet you would. Do you think your experience as a striker in those very early days would have helped you in that moment?
I think making sure that I hit the back of the net was a massive importance, because I do know that I would have got fined, and I'd sooner have the ball in the back of the net than getting a fine from Brian Clough.
Yeah, they used to come in envelopes with a tree on, didn't
tree,
they?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, red tree.
Did you get any fines at all?
No, I was lucky. I mean, the only person I know that ever got a fine was Kenny Burns for a bad pass. He's the only person that was fined for a bad pass, and he got a £25 fine. I think it was £25, and he got that at half time. The envelope was there waiting for him when he came in, and it was for a bad pass. And Kenny always says from then on he didn't want the ball. He just gave it to somebody else.
You must have got a good bonus from that first match, because didn't they weight the bonus? So it was the first match was the most important.
Yeah, I think they realised that when we won the league, we thought this is it, Europe, and then we draw the European champions in Liverpool, and Cloughie certainly realised. He said, "Look, this is the biggest hurdle we've got to get over, and then we'll deal with whatever comes along as we go along." And he said, right, he said, if money's your motivation, he said, we'll squash that right away. So he front-loaded the bonuses. So he said, now you've got no excuse. So I've taken that off the table. And I know money wasn't the object. It was the fact you were playing Liverpool, and the fact you wanted to go through into the next round of the European Cup. And then the second round of the European Cup, the bonus went back down to rock bottom basic. So because of that, and then eventually, you know, they went through and everything was hunky-dory after that, really.
Yeah. Unfortunately, injury struck again, so you didn't play in the second leg against Liverpool. You did come back from injury, and I think you even scored coming back against Everton.
Yeah.
That must have been a really good feeling.
Well, it was a strange effect, because I'd been injured after the Liverpool game, and then I got back into the side later on, and Viv Anderson got himself injured, so I went to right back then, and I went to right back a fortnight before the League Cup final against Southampton, and the first game back in the first team was at Everton, and I said to everybody, I scored that goal against Liverpool, and you all remember that goal, but the best goal of my career was that one at Everton, and nobody's got it on camera, nobody's got it on video, nobody's got it anywhere. So that's my story. I scored a better goal against Everton in a 1-1 draw. And then the next week we were at Southampton, so I got my life's ambition to play at Wembley again, if you like, but also play in the cup final and also win the cup final. So in that 2-week period was great, and then I think it was about a week or so after that my knee went again, and then the surgeon said, I think you should call it a day this season, and we'll see you again next season. And unfortunately in that time I played in the 3-3 Cologne game at the City Ground, and then after that game the surgeon said, I think you call it a day this season, and we'll see how you are for next season. And I never really recovered, to be honest. And so, you know, I missed the final, missed the European Cup final. And so that's the downside of football.
Yes, yeah, the perils of injury. Do you still get a medal for the European Cup?
No, never got an original medal. There wasn't one available. There was only 16 medals minted, I think, and they all went to the players. Although there is an issue there. Obviously, I don't know how to tell you that issue, or I will do anyway.
Yeah.
After the final of the European Cup, 16 medals were handed out. There were no subs used on that day, so there's 5 subs, and they came in the dressing room at the end of the game against Malmo. And Clough said, I want all those medals on the table there. And the players who played said, nah, not having that. So he said, all right, you players that have played, you keep your medals, but I want the 5 European Cup medals on that table. And so they put them there. It didn't bother me because I didn't get one. So, but consequently, I do know that 3 of those lads never got their original medals back. So there's a really bitter taste in my mouth. These lads never got their proper medals, but there was nothing we could do about it. And the players themselves, in some respects, thought because they never played, it didn't mean as much. I know that sounds daft, but when you see the way they give European medals out today, or any cup final medal, even the gardener gets the medal. And in, as I say, those in 68. And we had a young lad called Gary Mills who played in one of the European rounds. And because he crossed the white line, he deserved the medal. And I think even in the European history of the World European Cup, they still mention Gary because he was the youngest player to have played in a European match at that time. Even though he was sub, he came on and he played. And they made an issue of that for the good of the European Cup, young kids going through to their dream. But Gary never got a medal either. So, you know, consequently, Cloughie gave me anyway. Gary again didn't get one, but I get a replica. I got a replica made by a jeweller in Derby. So that's all I know. That's all I know where they came from. And you know it's a replica, but...
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this thing so many times before, and nothing's ever been done. And, you know, I think there must be a mint somewhere where they could mint 5 or 6 medals off and give them to the players that deserve it. But that's never happened.
No. But looking back, I mean, Cloughie, in Maurice Edwards' book, he says he described you as a model professional. And looking back yourself now, what would your favourite memory of Cloughie be?
Just being in the dressing room. And I mean that in the nicest way. The one person you wanted to walk through that door at 2:45 was Brian Clough. Because when he walked through that door at 2:45, we were ready. That, you know, we were ready to go. We knew exactly what. So that to me is a defining moment of what he had over us. People said he ruled by fear. You don't play if you rule by fear. But what he made you aware of, that each and every time you went out on that football pitch, you had to give your all. And if you gave your all, even though you go through a nightmare, even if you're playing the worst game of your life, if you gave your all and you didn't show it, that you were having a bad time, you were in next week. He never even said you were rubbish today. Never said that. Honestly, never said that.
Colin Barrett, thanks ever so much for sharing your memories today. It's been really special hearing those stories and thinking back to those glory years.
Thanks very much, Marcus. Thank you.
And thanks, of course, to you for listening. Don't forget that competition to win a book signed by Colin Barrett. Just visit the podcast page on brianclough.com, which has all the terms and conditions. I hope you can join me next time for more memories of the great man in the green jumper.